Qu'est-ce qui vous a motivé à assister au procès?
J'étais curieuse.
J'en profite, j'ai un petit mot à dire à ces groupies. Ben, on vous voit. Vous devriez avoir...
Red Rooms, or in its native French, Les Chambres Rouges. That's right, this is a French language film coming to us out of Canada, set specifically in Montreal. And yes, it's been another hectic week, another time I wasn't able to see anything in theaters. I think that will change next week, as I saw Flow is actually in theaters now, so I might actually go see that. I don't know yet. But until then, I have this lovely film that I found on Shudder. Before I get into it, I do want to stress that this isn't really a horror film, but more so a dramatic suspense film with uncomfortable moments that explores how various self-destructive behaviors and obsessions can play out for those involved. I can't really think of any trigger warnings here. It's not gory, it's not particularly violent or anything. It just has some very uncomfortable moments. It has some wildly interesting characters and some really great tense moments that are anchored by a couple of fantastic performances. I actually really liked this film, even though it wasn't what I expected going off of the description. Instead, this is like true crime adjacent and includes several bits of background metaphors and interesting clues about characters if you look a little deeper, so it has an underlying metaphor going on, which I really enjoy. Mostly centered around medieval type imagery, surprisingly enough. I'll actually try to explain those a little later on without spoilers, but trust me when I say that it is very interesting. As usual though, I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's get into it. What is this movie even about? And what is it that makes it just so interesting to me? Red Rooms follows a fashion model named Kellyanne, who becomes obsessed with following a high-profile murder case about a man who allegedly kidnapped and tortured 3 young girls and posted their snuff films on the dark web in things called Red Rooms for people to anonymously watch and buy using cryptocurrency. As the case goes on, Kellyanne interacts with another obsessed fan named Clementine, who believes the man is innocent, and things kind of play out from there as the two interact and the case goes on. As you can see, I think it's a pretty good setup for a true crime thriller. Imagine my surprise when, instead of the film following the case and coming up with twists or becoming a detective thriller or something where these 2 girls actually need to find out who really did it or something, the film instead turns into a kind of dual character study, which is really quite cool. Kellyanne is this very strange woman who lives a very odd lifestyle. Her apartment is very luxurious but has next to no furniture. She's a whiz at online gambling and seems to get some sort of sick thrill seeing other people suffer, like when they lose a lot of money in online poker, but then will also open her home up to somebody else, so it's a little odd. And then we have this other character to study in the girl Clementine, who is obsessed about the case for very different reasons than Kellyanne, and is just much more outspoken and gung-ho with everything she does. She's a great foil to Kellyanne in general, and what I love most about their dynamic is that Clementine surprisingly starts to ask the same questions about Kellyanne that the audience does, mostly being, why is she so obsessed with this case? Where did she figure all this out? Where does she get her money? Things like that. There's a very morbid and interesting answer to all of those that can be debated and broken down later on, but it deals with a lot of spoilers, so I'm not going to get into it too heavy. So instead, let me just say that it is something you probably aren't going to guess at. This movie is really good at subverting expectations in favor of a more disturbing but interesting path. Like I said, this isn't a detective thriller. Kellyanne isn't trying to solve the murder or something, she's just getting involved and figuring things out. It's really interesting. And I kind of really like this movie. I think a lot of this film couldn't work without its centered performances though, mostly from Juliette Gorepi, sorry if I mispronounced that, as Kellyanne. She just has so many little micro expressions for how Kellyanne feels about certain things and actions. You'll see like the corner of her lips curl up, or maybe she'll adjust how her eyes look, or maybe she'll get a little crazed here or there. It's so interesting. She's just someone you have to study closely in this film, and it just fits so well with who Kellyanne is as a character and who she purports to be, and how other people see her. Even when she's starting to fly off the handle, Gariepi here is able to make it feel believable and frankly very disturbing. Like I said, nothing too crazy. I really can't think of any trigger warnings here besides just descriptions of the murders, but that's it. The birthday scene is something else. That is wild. On the other side, we have her foil, Clementine, played by Lori Babin, who is also perfectly cast for the role. Clementine is this very strange character that is pretty opposite Kellyanne in many ways. She has little money, is obsessed with the killer himself and not the actual case, but also strangely seems to know exactly what she wants and isn't afraid to act out, while Kellyanne is much more reserved. Clem is very open and loud, and Babin here portrays her awkwardness and strange quirks very, very well. She has several emotional bits too that resonate incredibly well if you can gel with it. So, fantastic work to both of these leading ladies. There's not a lot of other people I want to point out here. I could talk about the killer himself, but he genuinely doesn't have much to do. So instead, I want to point out the director here, Pascal Plante, as I think he did a fantastic job all around with these actors and the setting. He also wrote the story too, so that's awesome. Some really great work. And there's even some really interesting hidden details and several wide shots as well that I believe he added in. For example, there's one shot later in the movie that shows just a whole bunch of security cameras, and if you notice, in the corner of one of them is a red room being played out. I'm like, okay, that's actually really cool. That's really smart that it's just tucked over there in the background. I really like that. Speaking of background, I do want to break down some of the smaller details and references in this, so let me try to do that without too many spoilers. A big one is Kellyanne's seeming fascination with female historical figures from the medieval age. The most obvious is probably her AI companion that she has an AI companion in this movie that kind of works like Siri, only she named it Guinevere, or Guinevere for English speakers, who is a very famous female figure in literature, being King Arthur's wife, who was ultimately sentenced to death after her love affair with Lancelot was discovered. That's significant, given on a similar note, Kellyanne also has an obvious attribution to the Lady of Shalott, as seen by her computer background portrait, which I should have up on here, which is a very famous picture of the Lady of Shalott and her username online. Now, this is probably the most interesting part to her history that we can see definitively and kind of pinpoint together outside of her working out and fashion, as Kellyanne's story very closely mirrors the actual poem The Lady of Shalott, which is about a woman in Camelot who is cursed and upon seeing Lancelot becomes obsessed and tries to reach him, dying on the way. That's not a spoiler for the movie, just so you know. That's just the poem. It's all very abstract in how the poem itself and these characters connect to Kellyanne's character and her arc, but it just fits really, really well for the themes of fascination and obsessive decisions and how those can lead to self-destruction. And again, Kellyanne is just a very interesting character overall. For example, why doesn't she have any furniture? All she owns is a computer chair. Why does she like to crush people in online poker? It's money, but it also feels very calculating to her. She's a technology whiz and knows numbers really, really well, but for whatever reason, she decided to be a model and to just make money through online poker. Why exactly is she so obsessed with this murder case that she feels the need to show up to it every day? It's so interesting to try to decode and then to experience what she does in the latter half of the film and try to piece everything together. It's wild. It's actually a lot of fun. So cool. There's also somewhat of a sexual nature to it, although it's never explicitly shown or talked about. It's just something you can tell as like, oh, this is supposed to hint at her getting some sort of sexual pleasure from something, but maybe it's not. It can really be discussed and I love that. This is just one of those movies and one of those characters that you can analyze and report back on in a variety of ways. It's so good. And of course, that doesn't mean the movie is perfect or anything. It does have some nitpicks here and there. Sometimes there are very, very long, monotonous shots of Kellyanne just walking around, or some boring scenes here or there of just the standard courtroom stuff going on, but I think all of it is in service to the overall product. We need the background of the case. We need to see how the court looks and who acts in there, and I guess how Kellyanne walks and how she behaves in the outside world. I love how the man on trial too is in this big glass box and he barely moves. He's always just sitting there looking calm or bored. It's really interesting and has a very cool scene later on in the movie that is just fantastic. And lastly, the music in this is just okay. For the most part. There are a few scenes that are stuck in my head due to some perfect musical stings though, so I really enjoy that. Those were very smartly used, I feel. But overall, I think this is just a very smart, very interesting and unique film about a more realistic-esque type of obsession. I'm not going to say it's fully realistic, but it's more grounded. I think if you're a fan of character studies and some true crime stuff sprinkled in maybe, just to note there's nothing supernatural in this film, like I said, it's very grounded in reality, then I think you'll enjoy this movie and pick it apart just fine. It definitely sets you up to do that. So I say give it a watch. I highly recommend it. So ultimately, Red Rooms gets a 9 out of 10 from me. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around for another one. Yeah, I should be able to get into theaters next week. There are a couple of movies I want to watch. It looks like I might be skipping Wolfman. I don't really care. It's getting mid-reviews anyway. Things I've seen say that it tries to be more cerebral and it doesn't quite work that well, but we'll see. Have you guys been hearing about this Insidious stage show that everyone was interested in, and then it turned out to be more of a comedy than a horror show, and there's no set or something? I keep hearing about it, that it was in Detroit, and then it just got canceled. Has anyone been to that? I'm very curious. I'm not even a fan of the Insidious franchise, but that is very funny to me. I haven't even seen any like horror stage shows, but I don't know. I've just heard very interesting things about that one in particular and how people paid these like $70 to $100 tickets, leaving completely disappointed and being like, this is not what was advertised. I don't know. I'm kind of curious about it now. Maybe I can find a video of it online or something. Let me look up a slime tutorial for those in the know. Anyway, after that, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, ring that bell so you don't miss a video. Let me know in the comments below, did you see Red Rooms? Did you like Red Rooms? What else did you like coming out of French Canada? I don't know. Either way, after that, just have a great day. And if you're not, have a better one. See ya.
I'm just a ghost in your stereo. The fading memory of a shipwreck in the undertow. You're just a lost song on your own. And I'm just a ghost in your stereo.